Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends over at Tza'ar Anytime, wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, it's wonderful to have you along for the experience. And we have a sponsor for this week's podcast. It is sponsored anonymously as a schus for Refuah Shlema for Kol Cholei Yisrael, and it's a schus for Rabbi Orlofsky and his family for much bracha v'hatzlacha, and it's a schus for the donor and his family. Thank you, Rabbi Orlofsky, for making the world a little brighter and happier. Wow, what a beautiful sponsorship, and that was really great. And we like to keep everybody coming along, and thank you. That it's people like you who make this podcast possible, and I hope it will be a schus for you and for Klal Yisrael, which is always nice to include ourselves with everybody else, and especially for a nice little shout out for me. And we're looking forward to more people like you sponsoring the show to make it possible to keep us doing the good work that we do. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Okay, I want to start by telling you a chiddush that I had. Yeah, and it'll tie into a little bit of what we're talking about this week. And we'll see whether or not I finish all of my business to get to more things that I have to say. It's incredible. You think that, after like 250 hours, I would have run out of stuff to say. But as we'll see in a moment, a lot of it is inspired by the good people who watch and listen to this podcast. As you know, I give a tefillah shir. And when you look at, we started with Shmona Esrei, and there are a lot of perushim on Hashem Sfasai Tiftach, which is, of course, what we say at the beginning of Shmona Esrei, and in fact is included in the Shmona Esrei itself, right? It's not actually Shmona Esrei, but it is attached to it. Ad Kedei Kach, that is not considered a hefsek between Goal Yisrael and Shmona Esrei. It's considered part of it. So somebody asked me, how come by Mincha and by Musaf we add in the pasuk Ki Shem Hashem Ekra Havo Gadol Elokeinu? And I looked around. I could not find Mefarshim who talk about it. Don't explain why that's added on. So what can you do? It's fun to think that I know everything, and that's one of the great things about having a podcast, because you can edit out whatever you don't know and just keep in the parts that you do know. This is how Joe Biden made that video where he told Trump he wanted to have a debate with him, and you could see it was edited like 15 times. So that's the great thing about having a video reality as opposed to a real reality. But so I didn't know. Anyway, when we finally finished our first learning of Shmona Esrei, we then went to Birchas Kriya Shema. And the beginning of Birchas Kriya Shema and Kriya Shema really is Baruch Hu. Yishtabach is part of Sukkot Zimra, and it starts with Baruch Hu. And the Mefarshim explain, why do we start with Baruch Hu? We start with Baruch Hu because it's like Rebbe Sayin Varech. Because you cannot start anything without preparation. So before you bench, you say, Rebbe Sayin Varech, Rabbi Isai, come, we're going to bench. You need time to prepare yourself. Things should not go, there's a halacha, you can't just walk into shul and start davening. You have to wait at least the amount of time that it takes to walk Dalet Amos. Otherwise, it's just start. You need preparation. Rav Shadron used to take a boat to Eretz Yisrael, not a plane. I've heard different reasons for this. One is that he didn't like flying. But that's not what he said. What he said is 12 hours is not enough time to prepare to come to Eretz Yisrael. You need more time than that. So I need a whole boat ride, to prepare myself to come to Israel. Because without preparation, nothing is going to be successful. You need time to stop and to think about it. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And if you just walk in, without anything, there's a whole bunch of old Jewish jokes. It's one of the areas that I have. I have a bunch. I try to collect the old Jewish jokes, if nothing else, just to make sure that they stick around, But this woman comes to the rabbi and says, I'm not coming to shul anymore. I'm sick of it. Every time I come, it's the same thing. Ne'ilah, 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 right? So, yeah, sure, if you just walk in for ne'ilah, you're not going to appreciate the whole Yom Tovim experience. There's a whole Elul. And then there's a Rosh Hashanah. And then there's a Seres Tshuva. And then there's an Erev Yom Kippur and a Yom Kippur, right? And then your Kippur builds up to a crescendo till you get to Ne'ilah. But if you just walk in at the end, there used to be these films where it would say in the ad, no one will be seated during the last 15 minutes of the film for the dramatic conclusion. You have to be there for the whole thing. And often people miss that. So you need preparation. So Baruch Hu is the same thing. So as I was looking into Baruch Hu, I came across a medrash that says the following. How do you know you're supposed to say Baruch Hu? From the pasuk, Ki Shem Hashem Ekra Havo Gadol Elokeinu. And I wanted to say, I didn't see this anyplace, but it suddenly hit me. Since we say Baruch Hu before Ma'ariv, and we say Baruch Hu before Shachris, we have that preparation before we start davening Ma'ariv and Shachris and going into Shmona Esrei. But there is no Baruch Hu by Mincha and by Musaf. So we add in the pasuk, Ki Shem Hashem Ekra, which is the pasuk from which we learn out that you're supposed to say Baruch Hu. And we add that in at the beginning of the Shmona Esrei. That to act as the Baruch Hu and the preparation for it. That's my own idea. If you like it, great. If not, sign up for the Tefillah share and see if you hear anything you do like. Why do you want it for me? You got this one for free. Anyway, but what it means is that I never liked that. I used to hear people say, it goes, I don't know if the pshat is true, but the idea is definitely true. I learned the Chavetz Chaim, when you would say over a Musar Shmuz, they would always say, yeah, but is it Mukhrach? Is that really what it means in the Chazal that you're saying over to get this Musa Haskel? Is it true? It doesn't matter if it's true, if the pshat's not true. Because who says that you're right? When I started teaching in Aish, I'll tell you just a little fun thing. So I was teaching in Aish, so they gave me a bunch of classes to do. And at some point, they gave me the 5 levels of pleasure. Now, there have been people who have leveled criticism that, Aish Torah, they do things that sound more like pop psychology instead of like, just, a down and dirty Torah like Or Samech does. And sometimes, I have to say, I saw an interview, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, where some from Aish, where they said, we sell the sizzle, not the steak. Okay, I don't think that's a good idea, but to say, but I know that Reb Noach was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. So there's 5 levels of pleasure. They have physical pleasure, and then they move up to love, and then they move up to meaning, and then they go to power, and the last one is Avas Hashem. And that's the greatest pleasure. So it sounds cutesy, like, well, where'd you get this from? And that's me. I always ask questions. I think I told the story that when I was tricked into taking an NCSY chapter in Los Angeles, the fellow who tricked me into taking it, once I ended up with the job, he says, don't worry, I'll walk you through it. I'll teach you everything. Don't worry about it. And a week later, he resigned. So I didn't know what I was doing. So I went down to regional office and I read everything. Every old brochure, every booklet, everything. Now, I didn't know people don't do that. They just make it up as they go along. which is why if you ever go to the Orlofskys to play Risk, it's a lot more fun than if you play by the rules, because none of us had the patience to actually read the rules. We got a general idea and we made it up as we went along. It's a lot more exciting than the real game. They call them house rules, like the $500 that you put in Monopoly and you get if you land on free parking. That doesn't exist anywhere. Doubles when you land on, you get 400 when you land on Go. All these are house rules. They're not true, but they make them as they go along. But we made it up a little bit, So I like to ask questions. I didn't know that by NCSY, so I read everything, and it turned out that I was the second most knowledgeable person about NCSY in Los Angeles. The first was Lee Sampson, who had started the region 10 years earlier, and the second was me, because no one ever read this stuff or knew what was going on, which I think is so interesting. People take a job and they don't know what they're doing, where they're coming from, what the background is. When I became regional director, I knew nothing. So the gold standard in NCSY was someone by the name of Itchy Lowenbrown in Baltimore, Zatzal. So I called up Itchy and I asked him, could I come down to Baltimore, and maybe you could show me the ropes. He says, yeah, sure. So we set an appointment, and I got into my little Chevy Nova and I drove down to Baltimore. And there's no cell phones back then. So I found a payphone. I called him up. I said, I'm trying to find your exact address. And he says to me, where are you? I said, I'm here I'm here in Baltimore. I'm looking for Park Heights. I know you live over here. He goes, okay. And I was a little confused because it sounded like he wasn't expecting me, And I found the place and I drove over and we schmoozed a little bit. And then he stops and he says, I've been doing this for 7 years. You're the first person who ever asked me what I'm doing. And he took me to the office and he gave me copies of all of his flyers, all of his booklets, all of his things. People go in and they don't bother asking. They don't try to find anything. So you're going to walk into Yom Kippur and you don't have an Elul, and you don't have a Rosh Hashanah and a Sesmei Tshuva, you don't have Slichos, you don't have, everything that goes into the preparation. You're going to be at a terrible disadvantage. So we start Shemona Esrei, so we say Baruch Hu, get ready. And if we don't say Baruch Hu, we say Kishem Hashem. And so we have to have that prep. Anyway, I'm looking at this class, the 5 levels of pleasure. And I said, this has to come from someplace. And I start asking around, and no one seems to know. No one seems to know. I had the same experience when I was learning by Rabbi Orlofsky. He would get up and he'd give shir, and I would write over my notes, and I'd see there's like 4 steps missing. I don't know how he got from here to there. And I went around to everybody in the shir. I couldn't find anybody who knew where those missing 4 steps were until I went with one of the guys who was in the shir room when he was preparing the shir. And he says, oh, yeah, he spoke this out. He spoke it out in the shir room, but he didn't do it in shir, and nobody else seemed to notice, So I've told this story before, but so there was a Shalom Meshiv in the afternoon, big Talmid Chacham. And whenever I'd come over to ask a question, he would get that nervous look. I get that a lot from people. Like, I'd like to be anywhere other than here talking to you. So I said, I'm not, one of the major learners in this place. What do you get nervous for me? He said, you're the only guy in the Beis Medrash who makes me nervous. I said, why? He said, because you ask easy questions. I know why you're here. You want to know what these 2 lines are doing in Taisvus. I said, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. He goes, I know. Nobody knows what those 2 lines are doing in Taisvus, but you're the only one who will ask it. So when people say things like, this might not be pshat, but, the idea is correct. It doesn't work that way. There's the Rav Henoch Leibowitz, the Rashiva of Chavetz Chaim, was very big on Chochmas HaMosar. First, it has to make sense. I heard from Rabbi Nissel, who said he heard from Reb Volber, who heard from Rabbi Yerucham, who heard from the Alta, who heard from Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, how to learn Musar. And he says he would sit down with the Mesilas Yesharim and he would learn it mamish be'iyin. and ask all the kashas and rip it all apart until he felt that he really had pshat. And once he felt that he really had pshat, he would say it over and over and over again until the tears began to flow. But the Mussar only works if what you're saying is accurate. Otherwise, you can say anything you want. And who says that it's true? You know? So whenever I hear people say, well, I don't know if the pshat is true, but the idea is certainly true. No, it doesn't work that way. You better be able to back it up, you know? So I finally found someone who said he based it on the Sefer Chinuch, on the mitzvah of Avas Hashem in Kriya Shema. So I look it up. And he said, this is what the Sefer Chinuch says. The way you get to Avas Hashem is by knowing that Avas Hashem is greater than Oisha, Banim, V'Kavod. So now I got it. Oisha, that's what they call fifth level pleasure. You know, physical pleasures, money, things that you can buy. Banim, that's love. That's family. And the raya is people who have money will end up, spending it on their children. Right? Every year they make a study. If you have a kid, what it's going to cost you to raise him till he graduates college? Some enormous amount of money that nobody has. Abundance will give money, and people will sacrifice their children for kavod, meaning. It says kavod here. It means meaning, right? And Raya L'Dava is people will encourage their children to go and fight, even though they know that there's a chance they'll get killed, instead of just trying to, to get them out, because meaning is more important. And Avas Hashem is greater than all those. I said, that's 4 levels of pleasure. So it took me a while to track it down. They said, yeah, the Sefer Chinuch also adds after kavod memshala, power. I said, no, he doesn't. And I went around, I got 3 Sefer Chinuchs. None of them said it. They all said, Oishe banim kavod. So I finally found the English Sefer Chinuch, and in the footnotes he mentions that there's a Ta'ah Sefer that says memshala. But that's a mistake. It doesn't belong in the text. There's only 4 levels of pleasure. And that's why when I try giving the class and I watch other people give the class, nobody can explain the second level. Mehechatesa, that the desire for power is greater than meaning in your life, a meaningful life. People will trade meaning for power. There might be people, but that's not a given. It's not an absolute. And that's why people always have trouble explaining it. It's really the 4 levels of pleasure. And I told this to the people in the upper ups, and they said, yeah, it's okay. We already wrote up 5 levels of pleasure. So you got to know where it's coming from. You got to understand it before you do anything. So Elul is a time of preparation. This is a time where we're getting ready. And as the pasuk in Akev says about Eretz Yisrael, Eri Hashem Alecha me'reishis hashana ad achri shana, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And Rabbi Moshe Shapiro would often point out, this teaches us that there's something called the beginning of the year and the end of the year. When the year ends, the year is over. Right? Tichla shana v'kiloi secha. That's it. The year ends, and now a new year begins. And we hope for a good year. That's what we hope for. But at the end of the year, we have to take care of all the things that need to be taken care of. We need to do all of our housekeeping. And the way Rabbi Moshe explained it was that you're given a certain amount of life on Rosh Hashanah, and it runs out at the end of the year. And comes Rosh Hashanah, you need a Kadosh Baruch Hu to make a new deposit in the account for you. And without that life, you won't continue. But that's it. Life is over. It's just 1 year. A year is a totality. Everything is inside of that year, and now it's all done. So comes the end of the year, we have to make a cheshbon and nefesh and make an account of our lives and put things into Seder. And, maybe I'll share one more vart over here. Somebody asked me about time travel. Jews didn't believe in time travel. The answer is no. There's no time travel. You can't. The only thing that really exists is the present. Because when the future comes, it's the present. And what was the present is the past. So you live in the present. This is sort of the concept of Mechadesh B'Tuva Kol Yom Tamid Maaseh Bereishis, that the idea that there's a continuity is an illusion. Is not. There's only this moment in existence, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps creating the world anew every moment. It's an illusion that we think there's a continuity. It's so interesting. I read an article once in Scientific America where a person actually has equations where he suggested that there's no such a thing as time. There's just endless amount of parallel universes. And you exist for only in that universe and only in that moment. And the next moment is a different universe. And it's an illusion that you have. It's mamish. It's mamish mechadesh b'tuva v'chol yom tamid maaseh bereishis. It's an amazing concept. Only he's got fancy equations to go with it. But so I said, there's only one instance I know of time travel. And that is, the Rambam says, when the year ends, so you look at yourself, if you're a Rasha, so you get written in the Sefer Mesim. If you're a Tzaddik, you get written in the Sefer Chaim. If you're Beinani, so Toilen ad Yom Kippurim. So what's the definition? A Tzaddik means you have more mitzvahs than Averis. Schuyas, more schuyas, right, than Averis. If you're Rasha, it means you have more Averis than schuyas. And the Beinani is 50-50, exactly 50-50. So if you do tshuva during the Aseres Mei Tshuva, then you'll go into Sefer Chaim on Yom Kippur. And if not, well, you'll go into the other book, yeah? Because the Beinani book is just a temp file, then we close it down. So the Kesef Mishnah over there asks the question, what do you mean if I do the Mishnah of mitzvah of tshuva? Because if you do one more mitzvah, it'll change from 50-50. He says, why? Well, if I do one more mitzvah, why does it have to be tshuva? Put on tefillin. Say Kriya Shema. Give it tzedakah. Well, why, if I do tshuva, why is that the key? So Itzel Blazer, the Talmud Muvag of Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, his answer is, it doesn't matter what else you do. If Dir Shah Hashem Behi Matzu, when the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is right there, and he's so close to you, and you have the opportunity to be able to do tshuva, and you don't, there's nothing you're going to do that's going to outweigh how terrible that is. That's his answer. Chaim Shmulevitz and Sichas Musa gives a different answer. He says, that's not the point. When last year ends, when this year ends, right, you're 50-50. I don't care what other mitzvahs you do. The only other mitzvahs that you do get counted towards next year. This year is closed. The books are closed. If you were 50-50 when the book's closed, it doesn't matter what else you do next year. That's on next year's cheshbon. Says Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, unless you can do time travel. And that's what tshuva does. That when you do tshuva, you can turn your averis into mitzvos. So that when you do tshuva in the new year on the actions you did last year, you can take some of your averis and either turn them into shogeg or turn them, if you do it mamash me'ahava, into mitzvahs. And then it's not 50-50 anymore. You took some of the negative ones off the scale by going back in time and changing retroactively your kavanas. That's what tshuva does. So you understand. You have to get the accounts done because the books are going to close, and everything's done. So all of that is by way of introduction, because I've been getting a lot of emails recently from people. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I don't know. I've been saying a lot of things that seem to be inspiring people a lot. And by the way, I'll just throw it out there again. I mentioned the idea of starting another online shir. I was thinking of doing Pirkei Avos. I've gotten 2 responses so far. Not really enough to make a shir out of. If anybody else might be interested and wants to let me know. The other thing is that someone who is a professional in the podcast industry says that in the frum world, there are people in Chutz La'aretz who would like to know what's going on in Eretz Yisrael. People in Eretz Yisrael don't want to know what's going on in Eretz Yisrael. But people in Chutz La'aretz might. And he suggested that like once a month, I have somebody and we'll do a podcast bringing in all the current things that are going on in Eretz Yisrael and the politics and the things like that. So there might be some people who are interested in that. There might be people who are not. Reach out to me if you think it's the kind of thing you might like or might not like to do, because my son, who has actual contacts in the government, I thought of the idea of having him on to talk about the matzav in Eretz Yisrael and the politics and what's going on behind the scenes and whatever he can say without ending up in jail. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, give me a shout out. Let me know. But none of the things I've been saying lately have elicited a lot of response, and I want to share some of them with you. So this is end of the year housekeeping, if you will. I got a lot of response to the first part of our interview with Rabbi Greenwald. Yeah. As a Rabbi Orlofsky crazy, I love you already. And you'll find out at the end of this that she's a Hasidisha. In case you think Rabbi Orlofsky crazies are only teens and people in their 20s, there are little children and elderly and everything in between who can be a Rabbi Orlofsky crazy. As a Rabbi Orlofsky crazy, I've heard you lament about our spoiled generation more than once, but you did not really touch upon any solutions. No, of course not. What's the point? At this point, I'm just a cranky old man who likes to sit and complain. Hey, how come the kids are into Kiddush? Why doesn't somebody do something? If you're not, there used to be an old expression, if you're not part of the solution, then you're me. May I humbly offer the following. Now, this is mind-blowing, this little email. And I feel like I'm reading this mostly to make everybody else feel a tremendous sense of inadequacy. I certainly did. Number one, have a large family. Now, full disclosure, not everybody has that option. When I was younger, and I didn't have the tact and the grace that I have today, I met this Haredi fellow that I knew, and I said, "You have kindlach?" He says, "Yeah, I have two." And I guess he saw the expression on my face, and he says, "Yeah, me and my wife aren't that fertile." I was like, "Yikes!" Have a large family. Kids in a large family learn to help, to get along with others, and realize that the world does not revolve around me, myself, and I. Caveat. It really depends on how the parents do it. There are children who are in a large family who have no problem, all sitting around and watching the parents run around like chickens without their head on. So again, it really depends to the point that you make at the end of how you are mechanech them. After I had a heart attack and my brother Gedalia had a heart attack, and I had what was supposed to be a triple bypass and was only a double bypass. It's still an embarrassment at the family simchas. Everyone had got a triple bypass except for me. And then my brother Gedalia got a quadruple bypass. So one of my brothers, he says, my kids are really frightened for me now. When I go outside to shovel the snow, they watch from the window with a concerned look on their face. 2, don't have a lot of money or have money the way I read about in the book about Moshe Reichman, where they would dismiss their maids one day a week and all children were required to clean their very large house from top to bottom with no time for friends that day. This beautiful chinuch shows up later in the book where his daughter, who was living as a young married in Israel, would clean her house herself instead of hiring help so as not to make herself different than her Israeli friends who couldn't afford an ozeret. That comes down, it's not inherent. It all comes down to, I know families that get into financial distress because the kids demand a lot of things, even though they don't have a lot of money. So again, It'll come down to how you do it. Obviously, showing respect to your parents and not demanding, expecting everything from them will go on to the next generation. My father used to say it to me. He says, one of my uncles never gave his kids anything, and they all liked him. He says, my father would say, I gave my kids everything. They can't stand me. Number 4, bring kids up with emunah and bitachon, where we are imbued with the idea that everything comes from Hashem. We don't get mad or sue or expect too much from people. We realize whatever Hashem wants us to have, we will have no matter the messenger. Maybe this should be number 1 on the list. 100%. 100%. This one, 100%. If you could imbue people with a sense of trust in Hashem, it goes a very long way. Well, I feel really bad for the father whose daughter and son-in-law broke off connections with him for not paying for a top college. Did he really need to wait until they were 30 to say no to them? Where was his chinuch until then? If you raise children to feel entitled and support them fully all along, what else was he expecting at this point? There's no question that the chinuch has to start when you're young. The older they get, the harder it is to change bad habits. As a case in point, I was raised in a family of 12 children. My father was first in Kollel, then a Maggid Shir in Yeshiva Katana. We were raised in a happy home that obviously was not too rich in Gashmias. Most of my siblings are either still in learning or in chinuch. 10 have made aliyah and live in Israel as my parents do. None of us have any expectations from our parents monetarily and rather try to shield them from any financial difficulties we might have. And that does not preclude us from having a close relationship. Givaldic. Going to the next generation, I'm expecting my 12th, Kenai Nahara. And yes, my husband mostly learns and works part-time in a yeshiva. My children are Baruch Hashem mature, helpful, and happy. I married off my oldest a year ago, and as in common in our circles, we're Hasidish, we split the rent for the first year with the other side. Now that we have to renew the contract, we asked the other side if we could maybe split it for another year. A third on us, a third on them, and a third for the new couple. Just to give them a little extra help, as my son-in-law, Baruch Hashem, is still sitting and learning, and my daughter is working as a Mora Mitakenet. My daughter just told me last week that her husband said he does not feel comfortable that we should help them anymore. Baruch Hashem, they have enough from her small salary to live and don't want us to stretch ourselves. What can I say? Pure nachas. And I hope this renews your faith in the upcoming generation. It does not, but it renews my faith in you. And all I can say is, with whatever you are doing in your tefillas, please, Dovid Tzvi Hirsch, Ben Sarah Mira, throw in a good word for me. Because you are that lady in the parenting group that makes all the rest of us want to go home and kill ourselves. Okay, another one. Is this the spoiled brat one? A number of people wrote with concerns about my health. This one is in Hebrew. Now, this is very interesting. I meet Israelis who don't understand much English and listen to my podcast. And I said, and they tell me in Hebrew, I said, do you understand the English? He goes, must speak. It reminds me when they used to have the big evening for Shmiras HaLashon, they would have a big evening for Israelis in Hebrew and one for English speakers in English. And I often would participate in it. And these Israeli girls would come up to me afterwards and say, etc., And I was like, you understood the English? It was enough, must speak. I said, well, why don't you go to the Hebrew one? He goes, it's so heavy He says, when you come here, everybody's smiling, everybody's happy, everybody builds you up. You walk out feeling like a tzaddik. There, I feel like I'm beaten up. So I have had a number of people who've told me that they find the podcast is like one of the few positive Jewish experiences that they have in their life, So this is in Hebrew. Ani ma'od nehene lahakshiv l'shiurim shelcha keshani nosea b'kfishei be'eretz Yisrael. He enjoys listening to the podcast as he drives. Avoni lo ohev k'she'ata omer k'she'ata tipol l'deminatzia. I think that's an English word. L'deminatzia. O mi yodea matai ani yamut. Listen, Rosh Hashanah is coming up. None of us know. Ki anachnu tzrichim otcha. Baruch Hashem. Toda rabbah. The more people who want me around, that can only help my standing up in Shemayim. Ki anachnu tzrichim otcha. Chazak ubari v'zeh lo nishma tov b'shiur ledaiti. Yeah, don't keep saying how you're going to drop dead. Okay, I won't say it. I really enjoyed listening to the conversation you had with Rabbi Greenwald. It brought similar feelings of pride for me because, like the Rav, my parents were Bali Tshuva in the 50s, not in their 50s, in the 1950s. My parents were first-generation Americans who did grow up with Judaism in their homes, but I think their fathers worked on Shabbos. My father was sent to Cheder and spoke Yiddish. But as my parents got older, they became less observant. We just stopped being Jewish like our Zaidi was. After World War II, my father reconnected with the Rav of the shul he grew up in by offering him rides since the Rav did not drive. In the process, the Rav was Makar of my father. My mother agreed to come on board when they got married. My father is the only one from his family who have any descendants or legacy. None of my cousins had children. In fact, one is a female rabbi. Well, that doesn't mean she can't have children, of course. They say, at an Orthodox wedding, the mother of the Kala is pregnant. At a conservative wedding, the Kala is pregnant. At a Reform wedding, the rabbi is pregnant. Anyway. And even though two of my three brothers were not religious for a period of time, they met fantastic women who were very interested. And I can proudly report that they all have Torah-dic homes with observant children. Personally, I consider myself somewhere in between a BT and an FFB, since I had to learn many things on my own and am still learning. So thank you for the conversation, and thank you for Rabbi Greenwald for addressing the issues. As a long-term avid follower chassid of your shiurim and podcasts, I was very concerned to hear about your health challenges. Could I please trouble to let me know your name so I can add you to my tefillas? Dovid Tzvi Hirsch ben Sarah Mira. By the way, somebody sent me a very long email, a doctor, and said, I really think you should get a second opinion. And I tried that, The doctor told me that there's really not much you can do. I said, well, I want a second opinion. He says, okay, you're also fat. Anyway, that's an old joke. Wishing you a for Schleim and a gesunte lange Jahren. I'm in the middle of the show about spoiled brats where the McDonald's case was mentioned. Today I saw a sign in a kosher establishment in Lakewood that said, please use right door. The problem was that under that sign was another sign which read disclaimer and then spelled out right and left with two arrows to indicate which direction it was. I would like to echo the feedback you got recently from a fellow traveling kashrus auditor. Apparently, I am helping the international kashrus scene. I do this too, and your pods are one of the highlights of my week. I've listened to them from India to Ireland, Edinburgh to Eschborn, Dublin to Durban. Durban, yeah. Keep up the gewaltige work. Wishing you have all your faculties about you till 120. Listen, I hope I keep them till next week. I'm at the stage where my father was when everybody that he knew, the name was, who's that guy? Anyway, this one I just had to read because it was just amazing. I saw the subject and I misread it. Rabbi Orlofsky saved my hike. Now, I don't know why I thought it read Rabbi Orlofsky saved my life. But it doesn't. Rabbi Orlofsky saved my hike. Now, I want to give you there was a young lady who wrote a book about her battle with cancer and surviving cancer. And she said one of the things that got her through were my shiurim. And I've gotten a good dozen people over the years who told me that when they were sick, they listened to my shiurim and that gave them the chizuk and the strength to be able to get through their illnesses. And I said, Kupat Cholim should really offer my my shiurim as part of the package, you know. But I didn't save his life, but I did save his hike. On the most western tip of Texas lies a mountain range that has the highest altitude of Texas within it. This is known as the Guadalupe Peak. Dun, 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 dun. I gotta set the scene. As part of a traveling camp out west, I had attempted to hike the trail 3 previous times, but had so far failed to reach the summit. I feel that way when I have to leave my building on Shabbos and it's five flights up. Okay, a few more steps. You can do it. Just a moment to speak about myself again, because it is one of my favorite topics, you know. My daughter lives here in Har Nof. But, you know, in Har Nof, when you say someone lives 2 blocks away, it's vertical. So I have to go 5 flights of stairs up in my building, go across the street to walk down to her building, and then she's like 8 flights up. Might be 9 flights up. So, you know, they invited us for Friday night, and, you know, I often send my apologies. My wife said, I really want to go. I said, send my regards. But she really wanted me to go. So before Shabbos, I took the elevator up, and I took the next elevator up, and I learned in the yeshiva, so I walked to their house. I only had to walk up 3 stories and then walk back 25 stories to get back home. But anyway, so he's going in the tallest mountain in Texas. As I attempted my 4th, as part of the traveling camp, I attempted to hike the trail 3 previous times, but had so far failed to reach the summit. As I attempted my 4th, and what would probably be my last chance to surmount the peak, I failed. I'm not proud of it, but a quarter of the way up, the first 2 treacherous miles, I collapsed and gave up. 5 minutes later, as I desperately searched my phone for some motivation, I came upon your schmooze titled, Why Are Jewish People Depressed? I began playing with it and with my mind off of my struggling body. I continued the hike. It must have been funny to see me there in over 100 degrees Texas sun, grimacing up the trail, but laughing uncontrollably every few minutes. I smile as I remember that hour-long journey that brought me to a calmer section of the hike where I was able to surmount the peak, which had defeated me thrice times before. I don't know how old you are, but you have a really impressive vocabulary. Not everybody uses words like summit and thrice. So this is definitely inspirational. And when I wrote him back, he said to me, oh, yeah, and by the way, I gave that shit to a friend of mine who was off the derech and became from. That's sort of a PS. So I've been getting a lot of mail lately. I'm not reading all of them to you, but, you know, there's a lot of comments and a lot of observations that people make. And what can I tell you? That is, you know, I want to tell you something that stuck with me. maybe it was 20 years ago. I assume it was 20 years ago when cell phones were being introduced. And Rabbi Sharfman at the time, his seminary was not a Beis Yaakov seminary. But he said to me, I'm thinking of outlawing cell phones. Now, this was interesting because the Beis Yaakovs, they had a cell phone plan that everybody in the school got the same cell phone, and they wanted everybody to be working together and having the same thing. And so, he says, I'm thinking of, getting rid of cell phones. And I said, why? He says, not for religious reasons. He says, it used to be that I would give a shiur and the girls would go out and it challenged them. And they'd be talking about what we said and what we discussed. And it would continue onwards, these discussions. And that's effective chinuch. When you say over an idea, when the person is able to chazer it over, in most yeshivas, they have what they call chazoros hashir. You have to give this shiur, you go over it. Place of Chavetz Chaim, they give Musar Shmuz, and they have Chazaros or Shmuz, you know what I mean? But you go over it, you consider it. In fact, I remember there was a story with Rav Hutna, this Avreich in Chaim Berlin. He, after a whole day of learning, he gets on the bus to go home, and he opens up a sefer. And Rav Hutna looked and he said, he didn't learn one thing today that's worth thinking about. He right away has to open another sefer. Rafael Klasko, I saw him once, just standing outside of the Beis Medrash, thinking. And I said, what was this? He said, I saw these two older Talmidei Chachamim learning. And one of them would ask a question, and the two of them would just stand there and think. And I thought, that's the way you're supposed to learn. So don't just jump to the next thing. Noach Weinberg used to point out, he says, as you're talking, people ask questions and they're not even sure what the question is. They're working it out as they're talking instead of stopping to think and understand what the person said and then see if you understood it or not and what the question is. But people just start talking right away, and to leave you that time to have consideration. So the fact that we say things on this podcast that inspire people to go back and think about it and inspire people to write a comment. One person told me, I comment on all of your videos because I know it pushes up the formula that they use to calculate things, etc. So even if I have nothing to say, I make a comment. But the fact that people, I say things that really challenge people and get people to think, that's great. And I don't care if you agree with me or not. You can disagree with me as long as it's, respectful. And somebody had written me an email once where I quoted a pshat from one of my kids, and they wrote me this very brusque email. Your daughter's wrong. Look at the Rambam. I thought, that's not a way you speak to somebody you have any respect for. I wrote him back and I said, listen, do me a favor, don't write me anymore. Because if that's the way you talk to me, then obviously you have no respect for me. Mr. America says, why? What's the problem? What did I say? So it was pretty clear he didn't get it. So then I get a handwritten note with terrible attacks and insults and stuff like that, left in my mailbox, See, he just couldn't let it go. He wanted to get me. He's going to get me. So I save yourself the time, When I read these things, they don't really make a deep impact on me, But a person who wants to disagree with me and make a valid point, like the Hasidic lady who is expecting her 12th child and has no money, and her parents had no money, and all of her children are respectful and delightful, so I can honestly say I cannot relate to you. But was I inspired reading that? I hope somebody else got inspiration from it. Anyway, that's it. That's my end of my year housekeeping. I got a lot more emails, but I'm not going to read them all because we got more things to do. And Now we come to the question and answer portion of our program. And a lot of people look forward to the question and answer. But, people say to me, like, why don't you do like a live question and answer? I do all the questions. I think most of the people who sent them in are live. I don't think they're bots. Yeah. By Anonymous. If the reason we have Tza'ar is because Hashem wants us to get close to him by realizing it's from him, why doesn't he just give us good once we realize it's all from Hashem and we can see how good he is? This is a fundamental question. Fundamental question. I think we've talked about this in the past, but we'll make a seder just to, if I've spoken about this before, just consider this chazara, but it's such an important idea because as the Mesilas Yesharim begins, Yisod Chasidus v'Shorish Avoda Tamimahi, she's Bar V'Samis El Ha'adam Macha V'Asa Ba'olamo. First question, that's the foundation of everything, is why you're alive. So that's very important. Why were we put into this world where we have to do mitzvahs and we have to work so hard and we have nisyonos and we have all these struggles and we have all these tzaras? Just put us into Olam Haba. So the famous answer the Zohar Kodesh gives is because of Nama de Kisufa, the bread of shame. Meaning, if I just hand it to you, you will not appreciate it. In order to appreciate something, you have to have earned it on your own. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to create the world bedin, because that's the ideal world. The ideal world is you deserve everything you get. And as much as HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to take you by the henti and walk you down the street and give you everything, you're a baby. Like somebody said to me once, Hashem will forgive me anyway, right? Even if I don't do tshuva. I said, sure, if you can convince him you're a baby. A 2-year-old goes in the kitchen and makes a big mess. The parents don't expect him to show any growth from that or to any change. You understand the person's a baby, and that's the best they can do. So if you're a baby, no one expects anything more from you. If you're an adult, you want to be an adult. You want to be big. So then you have to stand up and take responsibility. And that's why the more that you're zoicha bedin, the greater it is. I spoke about this in the past. People say to me, why does Rosh Hashanah come before Yom Kippur? Why don't you first forgive us and then have the judgment? So I said, because, and I say this a lot, just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you can't do anything. And first you have a Yom Adin so that you can get rewarded for what you did do. Okay, then we'll deal with the things that you didn't do or the things that you did wrong. But you deserve reward for what you did do. And that's the big problem when people make a cheshbon nefesh. They just count the bad things they did instead of the good things that they did. But you have to take a look at your life and say, look at all the good things that I did. I deserve reward for that. So that's the ideal. Now, if he would just put us in Olam Haba, it wouldn't mean anything, right? If I create a computer program and I push a button and it goes happy, 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 it's not really happy. I just programmed it that way. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu just puts us someplace and says, oh, you're very happy, you did nothing to achieve it, it doesn't mean anything. Now, I heard a big Talmid Chacham say this, and I've never really understood it. But he said, obviously, the fact that we're only happy if we earn it is because Hashem made us that way, but he could have made us that we could have been just as happy without it. Well, you just short-circuited the entire Zohar Kodesh. The Zohar Kodesh says the reason that we're in this world is because Nam the Kizufa, and now you're saying, the Zohar is just kidding. Yeah, no, we're just put into this world, because Hashem decided to create the world that way, but he could have made us happy without it, in which case the question is, why do we have to be in this world? And the answer actually is we have no idea. And the Zohar just says that's how Hashem chose to make it, but that's not what he says. So I heard recording of Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, the Rosh Yeshiva of Nei Yisrael Zatzal, and someone asked him this question. And he said, couldn't Hashem just make us already in Olam Haba and be happy without having to go through anything? And he said, no, otherwise he would have. That rang more correct with me. And he said, the greatest thing is to be a Kodesh Baruch Hu. because HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us like him that we have choice. Without choice, we're animals or we're angels. We're pre-programmed. We do whatever it is that we're supposed to do, and that's it. We follow instinct, and nobody can stop to think anything more than that. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us like him. Therefore, the more you're like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the greater you are. So what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite. He's unlimited, right? He has everything. We, by contrast, are finite and limited, and we're not able to be independent. We're very dependent. Having said that, you could be less dependent, less limited, and less finite. You can become more like a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe you can't become Kadosh Baruch Hu, but you can break beyond your limitations. The more you break beyond your limitations, the more you become like a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So if a Kadosh Baruch Hu never gives you that opportunity to become independent, to become limitless, and to become infinite, more than you are now, you'll never enjoy the pleasure of being a Kadosh Baruch Hu. You'll be an animal. So I buy a puppy and I say, good puppy, and the puppy barks and it has no understanding. But if you have the opportunity to become more independent, more unlimited, more infinite, as much as you push yourself, that's how much you're going to be more like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the more you're like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more you get the pleasure from relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As Matti Berger once said, people say opposites attract. He says, of course, that's not true. Otherwise, you would take a nice Beis Yaakov girl and set her up with a Nazi, Opposites don't attract, likes attract. The more things have in common, the closer they become. That's what Ahava is. And so the closer we get to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the greater the experience is going to be. And so therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us in this world for us to become more unlimited than we are, more independent. Yeah, as Avraham Rashi says, by Noach, it says, Im Elokim is halech Noach. By Avraham, he says, halech lefanai v'tiyeh tamim. You go on up ahead. And the more you can go on ahead and do it on your own, to be able to live in din, the more you can reach that level, then that's the greater pleasure you're going to have. That's the true pleasure. It comes from independent. And that's why ultimately the world should have been made in din, where you can earn everything. Works out that we need rachamim. But the less rachamim you need, and the more you can do it on your own, the more we are going to enjoy the pleasure of being in this world. We're in this world, as the Mesilas Yesharim says, to do Torah and mitzvahs, to improve ourselves, and to stand up to nisyonos, because a nisayon helps us to grow and become a better person. Next question by Anonymous. Why do you think different places develop different accents if it's the same language? That's interesting. Babies can make any type of sound, and you can hear them when they're practicing sound. They're practicing all different sounds. They're making the sounds to speak an Asian language, and they to be able to speak, a Semitic language, and they have, they want to speak French. You can hear every sound being made, and then they filter out the ones that aren't being used. So the Jews who lived more in, let's say, Arabic countries, they kept the sounds that were more Arabic. The ones who lived in countries where they didn't have those sounds, they were able to have more of the European sounding sounds. So, for example, a Sephardi has no problem doing a ches or an ayin, the kind of guttural words, whereas an Ashkenazi has a problem with it. On the other hand, a Sephardi has a problem with a reish, reish, American reish, ra. They can do a reish where they roll it, but a regular reish they can't do. that's why the Teimanim, who had nothing to do with anybody, kept all of the sounds because they weren't talking to anyone. So they incorporated the most sounds. But every place you go, obviously they're going to have it. Now, how that works in with regional accents, Henry Higgins in Pygmalion, he could tell where somebody was from their accent, often within a few blocks. Different places pick it up. Same thing in America. There's a southern accent and there's a Maine accent, because Pepperidge Farm remembers that's a Maine accent, There's the slightly nasal American, accent that's more like Michigan, and then like when I was in the Valley and people talk like this, and, there's a Texas accent, different places where they are, sometimes it's influenced. So, for example, the American accent, there were a lot of Italians who moved to New York. And so you ended up with 33rd Street, you have a lot of the Italian sound to the New York accent. That's where it's coming from, yeah? So, you pick up those accents. And his mother comes into her son's room. It's 3:30 in the afternoon. He's still sleeping. She kicks the bed. She says, Angelo, what are you doing? It's 3:30 in the afternoon and you're still in bed. You don't got no job. You don't get married. You don't do nothing. I'm so disappointed in you. And looks at her and says, Mama, how can you talk like that? We're not Italian. Whereas the Irish, if you ever listen to Irish has a lilt. And so there's an Irish lilt that goes on, it comes along with it, that. And so these are different accents that where the regions come from, and they tend to come in and get adopted by them. The Southern accent is closer to the English accent because the English influence was more in the South than in the North. This is a layman's understanding of these accents. So that's the idea. The only pure way of speaking is, of course, those of us who grew up in Long Island. We have no accent. This is the correct way to talk, and everyone should remember that. And there's one last story. I was on a panel with Y.Y. Rubenstein, and he has quite a Scottish brogue, So he was saying at one point, if you look at the verse, I said, what's a verse? There's no I in that word. It's a verse. And he switches into a perfect American accent. He goes, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize this was difficult for you. I said, now you're talking like a person. But, everyone has the different accents that come along with their particular languages and pronunciation. And I guess the California people got it also from England, because in England, very often they'll end a statement with a question. Would you like a cup of tea? Which is similar to the Valley accent, The special today is salmon. So that's the idea. All right, that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can leave a comment. You can sponsor an episode. You can sponsor a Q&A. You can sponsor Parsha 5. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. Also, remember to let me know if you want, anyone's interested in Pirkei Avos, if anyone's interested in Israeli events, having someone come in and speak about that. And that's it for this week. Until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.